All right, everyone, welcome to this wonderful webinar to prepare our seniors in high school for the college application process. So I'm going to turn it over. My name is Amy Gardner, and I am one of the co-founders of Getfinity, and I'm going to turn it over to Sonali to get us started.
Hey, y'all. Well, it's so great to have y'all here. I was all about the college application process last year, so I hope I can be of some help today. So we can get started.
Okay, well, a little bit about us in Getfinity. So my husband, Ken, and I, we started a free mobile app. In January, we launched it. And the whole goal of it is to make volunteer tracking easier. So volunteer tracking and volunteering in general is an important part of the high school experience. And it also contributes to our college application. There's sections on there about that. And in the past, it's been a little bit cumbersome to have a pen and paper and keep up with that. So we thought, kind of like how you track your driving hours for getting your license, what about if it was it'd be possible to have an app where you could just track it on your phone. We and our teams live on the phone. And so to have everything in one place is really hopefully going to be helpful for everybody. So not only can you track all your volunteer hours in one place on your phone, but when you are getting to the place where you're applying for colleges and scholarships, and you have to think back on all the things you did over the past couple of years, Getfinity is one place where you can just run that report and you can see the different organizations that you were volunteering at, what you did at those different organizations, and you can kind of start to see, oh, wow, I've made an incredible impact. So hopefully that report card is also going to be helpful in this college application process. Because we know that not only is it helpful to have all of this in one place, it's also helpful for you guys to be able to see the difference that you've made so that when you're writing those essays and answering those questions, you can differentiate yourself on the college applications. So it will just, those volunteer hours not only are something to check off on the college application process, but they help you become a stronger leader and make an incredible impact in your community. So I encourage you, if you haven't done so already, take a minute after the webinar and download Getfinity. We are on Google Play as well as the Apple Store. And we hope that we can help you in your volunteering journey. And we would love to get your feedback, how we can make it better, how it's helping you, all those good things. Back to you, Sonali.
Awesome. Well, absolutely love Getfinity. If y'all need to hear more about Getfinity, I'll tell you all about it because they have been so awesome and they just have such an amazing app. Well, to introduce me and my work, I am the co-founder and executive director of a local RDU nonprofit that is student-led named General Services Foundation. We are actually a very new 501c3, but what we are here to do is we work with high schoolers around RDU and the Triangle area to actually teach y'all how to get into service for more than just the hours. So we have partnerships with over 40 nonprofits, and they come to us, ask us for ways we can get involved with them to really do more than those hours. So learning how to do drives, learning how to do fundraisers, learning to put on big events for nonprofits with other groups of amazing students just like you. Perfect. So that being said, let me tell you a little bit about our programs. So our first one is called Act in Advance. And what we are doing through this program is for students who have a little experience and understanding about the local nonprofit sector. what we actually teach y'all is about all these different nonprofits. So having guest speakers, building networks, and actually getting seed funding for all of your projects. So we provide mentorship for all of the projects you want to host, and projects that we do have coming in from the nonprofits. But as we provide mentorship and seed funding, you're really able to make that long-term difference. And at the end of the day, colleges are really starting to look at the difference you're making, not just the extracurriculars on your application. So what makes you stand out? And you can move to the next slide. Perfect. And so that being said, our second program is the Young Nonprofit Fellowship. This is for students who have a little bit more experience in the nonprofit sector already and are really looking to actually do something more in depth through an internship. So we use General Services Foundation's network to match you as a student to a specific nonprofit that you love and care about. So you can really make that long-term difference, whether it's throughout the summer or throughout the full year. And that being said, with all of that amazing things, you're allowed to do impact initiatives. So again, coming back to that whole idea of creating a project of your own, getting seed funding and mentorship for that. You're going to be having some assignments to learn a little bit more about the local nonprofit sector and professional development, which is, I feel like, something that we all need at this age. And then you're really able to showcase one cause that you're able to benefit throughout the entire year. Feel free to move to the next slide. Perfect. And that being said, one reason Getfinity and General Services Foundation are so passionate about what we do is the fact that, like, students who volunteer at the end of the day are able to make a better impact on themselves and their community. So 27% of volunteering helps gain reputable skills for the future careers and gives 27% of advantages over non-volunteers. This is something that not just colleges are starting to look for, but jobs as well. So future employers. So something to think about. And 96% of volunteers reported the action enriched lives and sense of purpose that they really get from volunteering. So they do better just personally, but then also within school, through the reducing of stress, ability to do better in classes, and all of those great things. Okay, so an introduction to myself. My name is Sonali Ratna Singha, and I am the Executive Director of General Services Foundation, as I previously explained. I have a passion for my local community, and I am a UNC Chapel Hill student. So I actually went through a little bit of a different path than others. So I started taking courses in 2021, so the summer of my junior year of high school. But then, of course, I applied for my undergrad last year. So in the 2021-2022 application round, and I am going to be graduating college in 2026. So for y'all who are looking and have more questions specifically about UNC, feel free to shoot all of those away. And that being said, whenever you have questions, feel free to use that Q&A in your bottom, probably it is, but in the bottom of your screen. And then Amy will be able to let us know what those questions are later so we can get to all of them and be sure we can really support you. Awesome. Feel free to go to the next slide. Okay, so first things first, the first step of your college application process is really figuring out where you want to apply, because how are you going to write all of your applications if you don't know where you're going to apply to? And so there are lots of different resources to figure out what colleges you want to apply for. And so some of the big four that we utilize here within our schools are the Common Application, also known as the Common App, College Board, as they have a program called Big Future, CFNC, which is specifically for North Carolina schools, and Big Future. And so that being said, You also want to look into what you prefer in a college. Are you looking for a small or large college, local or something far away, something city, something urban, something rural? And also kind of thinking of, do you want that college town vibe, or do you want to be smack in the middle of the city? So like, for example, a school like Chapel Hill, which is considered, I guess, a college town, would be very different than going to New York University, where you're smack dab in the middle of everything. What is your budget? Do you have a budget of a few $1,000s a year, or do you not have a budget? And so also thinking about, is it going to be the parents who are funding your college, or are you going to be funding your college, or is there a mix of both? Whatever your financial situation is, it's probably a good time to start thinking about that. And we'll get to that also on the next slide. And then, are you more interested in a public or private university? Some of these things, honestly, you don't have to be 100% on. Like, personally, I did not have a big preference between a public and a private university, so that didn't really cut anything out for me. But I did want to be nearby, and UNC was nearby and a pretty awesome school, and I decided to go with that when applying. So just some different things to think about, and kind of keep that in the back of your mind as you kind of go through the process. So kind of talking about that financial situation, scholarships. This is something important to think about. One thing I do want to let y'all know is that the average person who's applying to college, so the average student, they do apply to between 4 to 10 colleges. And so that means that each college has their own application and their own supplemental essays that we will get to. But scholarships is actually something that's usually on top of what you've already applied for. And so that being said, some people focus on scholarships, some people don't. And that is really just a personal preference. And so some different places to look for scholarships are from your colleges. Say, for example, UNC Chapel Hill has their Morehead Cane Scholarship, which is a full ride to UNC. NC State has the Park Scholarship. UNC Charlotte has the Levine Scholarship. So a lot of schools have their own merit-based scholarships or need-based scholarships for you to look into. And of course, those application processes are a little bit more rigorous, as you're kind of trying to go for a full ride at these schools. So just some things to think about. But to look for some smaller scholarships, you can also go to sources like FastWeb or Nitro, which is just honestly an easy Google search for some smaller scholarships. Because at the end of the day, there are hundreds of thousands of dollars of scholarship money that goes unnoticed or untouched every year. And so if you could tap into that, you'd be good to go. And then, of course, your school counselor, the resources you have in your community, these are all people you can come to and ask for advice. And so, of course, while thinking about that, you also want to think about what makes this scholarship different. So unrestricted or tuition. So what that means is some scholarships, especially the smaller ones, they just say, here is $500 if you get that scholarship. And it can really go to books, room and board, tuition, whatever you feel is best fit. On the other hand, some of the larger scholarships, you will usually see at the end of the day saying, hey, you have to specifically put this money for tuition or it doesn't count. And so you have to make sure you look into that specifically. And then, of course, are you going to go for smaller or larger scholarships? For example, those smaller scholarships, there might be a lot less applicants. So there might be a better chance of you actually getting that scholarship. But then that also being said, you may have to apply for more of those than you would the larger scholarships. Because if you get one large scholarship that pays for your room and board, your tuition, all of your fees, then you're kind of set there as well. And are you kind of looking for a specific college that you know you're going to go to, or are you going to apply for any college's scholarship? So kind of going back to that whole idea of the Park Scholarship or the Morehead Cane, are you going to be applying for scholarships that are specific to one college? So the Park Scholarship can only be applied to NC State, for example. Or what about these nitro or fast web scholarships where you can really place it into any college you go to? And that being said, you can do a mix and match of all of these different things. And it really depends on if you want to apply for one scholarship or 20 scholarships, that is all yours. And so you can really determine your time as your senior year goes along. And something else I also want to bring up to y'all is college tuition is not final. What this means is that, especially for private schools, if you see that your tuition is, I don't know, $68,000 a year, which is quite grandiose, but pretty reasonable for some colleges, what you can actually do is have a conversation with them, give them a call to their admissions office and say, hey, is there a way to drop this price? That being said, this is also once you've been accepted into the school. So don't say that when you're still applying. But once you're accepted into a school, it's really that now that they have chosen you, you have to choose them. So they will do what it takes to fight for you. And let me give you a perfect example. My cousin goes to college at Savannah Art and College and Design. And she also, when applying, was also looking into the Ringling College of Art and Design, which is considered like on the same level of caliber, which is pretty high caliber for an art school. And so what had happened is she called Ringling and was like, hey, by the way, I actually have a better tuition from SCAD, which is the Savannah College. And she was kind of like, can you match that or actually do a little bit better? And so they were like, okay, brought the price down a little bit. And then, so of course, that being said, she went back to SCAD and was like, hey, Ringling gave me this lower price. Can you give me a lower price? And then, of course, they brought her price down as well. And she went back and forth until they were like, no, we're not going to do this anymore. And then she ended up choosing SCAD as her final destination for college. And it worked because she saved quite a few thousands of dollars per year on her tuition, and it ended up being awesome for her. But yeah, you can move on to the next slide. Okay, so our biggest focus for the day is the common application. We understand that this process is very difficult when you're first figuring it out because you've never done anything similar. So we're really going to be going step by step through everything. So if it all feels like a lot, please do not worry because you have many months to figure it out before your application time comes around. And so what is the common application? So this is an application for you and what most of you are going to be using for if you're going to be submitting an application to a four-year college. And of course, some colleges, a few of them here and there use the coalition application as well, along some other things, but most students can use the common application and it's just well-rounded. It's nice and easy to use in comparison to some of the others. And it's probably what the most colleges are on at this moment. And so, of course, you can see the link that might be helpful. And for the class of 2023, your common app opens in August of 2022. So next month, y'all, you're going to do great. And why use this common application? Well, it's all easy. It's where you submit all of your applications and all you have to do is pay the fee, do all those things, and it automatically submits once you finalize your application and you're done. And so we will now have the opportunity to walk through all of this. So we're going to start off with the basics of the Common App. So when you first sign in for the first time, you're going to see this dashboard, except of course, the first time around, you're not going to have any colleges on it like I did. And so when you have figured out what colleges you're going to be applying for, you are going to go into the college search tab. So you can see two tabs over, and then you'll be able to add the colleges you want to apply for. And so of course, some of these might be reach colleges, which are considered like out of your range. So very small likelihood you're going to get into. Target schools, which you can see yourself getting into. You're pretty on par with their level. And then of course, safety schools, where just in case you don't get in into any of your target schools or reach schools, you have a backup and you still have someplace awesome to go. That being said, you probably want to have a few of each in your common application box. And of course, there are some other systems to do this, but generally speaking, you will be able to go to that college search, easily put them in. Like, for example, I had App State, but then I also had other schools like Carnegie Mellon, Chapel Hill, Duke, and you can see all of those different things. You can move on. And so once you've added all of your different pieces, the first and most important piece of your application is probably your personal statement. So what your personal statement is it is your essay that is sent out to every single college. That being said, it is the one that probably is the one you want to focus on first, because this is going to go into everything. For example, it'll be sent to App State, it'll be sent to Duke, it'll be sent to Carnegie Mellon, whoever is your choice, and whoever you have in your search when you submit, this is going to go to all of them. And so when people talk about college applications, this is usually the essay they refer to. And so you have 650 words, and you'll be able to write an essay on any chosen topic. And so they do give you 10 prompts that are reflected on the right. But at the end of the day, what you're going to be able to see is the fact that the last one, you get to also choose your own topic if none of them really match. And so you can really write about anything. This is yours. And that being said, make sure it's unique. Usually don't write about something simple like switching schools, breaking a bone, something like that. But at the end of the day, if you can make it good, write it about anything you want. If you already know your major, try to incorporate that into your story. So if you have a business major in your future, see if you can kind of pull that in. Like maybe you did a business related internship, really kind of showcasing that that's an interest of you and you are really seeking that. And if not, that is completely okay. You can still be seeking a business sort of thing, but not actually talk about business in your application. Another piece of advice, do not overdo metaphors. You have probably seen those applications that go all into the depths of the metaphors, but metaphors are great. Just don't make it completely go off topic to the point where you don't know what you're talking about, or the person who's reading your application doesn't know what you're talking about. So you might want to be careful with that. And a great way to mitigate that is to have other people read your personal statement after you have completed your draft, just to make sure you're on the right path at the end of the day. And do not use filler words. I cannot stress this enough. You have 650 words to write your entire application, for your personal statement at least. It probably seems like a good amount now, but that comes to about 1 to 2 pages to talk about the entirety of who you are that you want to share to your colleges. And that being said, you probably don't want to add little words like that or just, little things that could probably take up space that you could be utilizing. And I feel like this is common sense, but the biggest thing is no copying others, y'all. That is not a smart idea. They're going to catch you for plagiarism, and then you won't get into any of the colleges you want to. And at the end of the day, it probably isn't that original if you took someone else's work to an extent. But at the end of the day, make this yours and it'll be awesome. So our next discussion is the supplemental essays. So the biggest part is probably that personal statement, because it goes to every college, and you should have that done hopefully by the first few weeks of your senior year of high school. But for your supplemental essays, these are the essays that are individual per college. So for example, UNC supplemental essays are going to be different from NC State supplemental essays, that are going to be different from Stanford supplemental essays, and all of the sort. Of course, some of them do have similar topics, like maybe NC State talks about inclusion, another college talks about diversity, and so you can kind of reuse those topics, but don't do it exactly. So we'll go into that. So what are supplemental essays? They are the small essays that you have to write per college, and usually you only have between 100 and 5, I'd say usually 300 words, depending on the college. So for example, UNC Chapel Hill supplementals are all 250 words. Looking at this one, which I believe is Stanford, they're each 50 words. So imagine trying to put everything about who you are into 50-word essays, which is crazy because that's only a few sentences. And so at the end of the day, most of these essays are going to only come to between 1 to 2 paragraphs. So something to think about for y'all. But that being said, what you want to do is you want to take what you have and then cut it down. So you want to write as much as you can about a certain topic you're passionate about, making sure you're truly answering that question and then cutting that down a little bit. So if you end up having 500 words and you have to get down to that 300-word topic, write those 500 words. Don't take that 300 words and leave out interesting topics, because you'll probably be able to switch around sentences, cut things down in specific areas that seem repetitive, take away those words like that and but, and just that you don't seem like you need first. Also, be sure you always answer the question. Cannot emphasize that enough. We always talk about how we are so focused in on our application and our writing that we sometimes, I guess, go away from the central topic of whatever you're hoping to write about. So make sure that when you are going back and reviewing and editing your essays, that you are actually answering the subject of your matter. So if it's about diversity and inclusion and what you're going to do about it, make sure to write about diversity and inclusion and what you're going to do about it. So really being able to hit all of those different pieces and making sure you don't miss a part of a question. If they have a second part of the question, answer that. Don't forget about it when you're writing, because that may actually showcase that you have missed a part that might be essential to your make or break of your application. For essays called Why Us essays, before I kind of go into the depth about that, Why Us essays are essays for college applications that have colleges asking you, why do you want to choose that college? So for example, I know Duke has a Why Duke essay. So why do you want to go to Duke? UNC Charlotte has a Why UNC Charlotte essay. And there are similar ones probably across several colleges. This is one of the most common essays you will see. My biggest piece of advice for this essay is do not make it very generic. So do not go around talking about the weather in that area or the size of the school, because at the end of the day, a lot of other colleges could have that great weather, or a lot of other colleges could have that size of the school. That's not limited to just them. So for the YS essays, you really want to do your research. So kind of talking about, oh, I really like this program or this club that I can't find anywhere else. I get this opportunity at NYU that I couldn't get at UNC, whatever it may be. You want to really be showcasing the fact that you did your research, you showed that demonstrated interest, that you really care about this college. So usually you can actually take the topic and sometimes use the same essay for other essays and kind of switch it around a little bit. But for your YS essay, you want to be really careful when you do that, or if you even do that at all, because for the YS essays, you really want to showcase that you are talking about that college rather than any other college. Yes, and so that being said, extracurriculars. Extracurriculars, I feel like, are sometimes the most difficult because this is actually something you've probably been doing since freshman year of high school. You've been parts of clubs, you've been parts of organizations, you've been parts of different leadership positions that you have, all of these different things. Something that a lot of the times you will not hear until now is the fact that with extracurriculars, you only have 150 characters per extracurricular. Again, let me repeat this to you, not 150 words, 150 characters. That's like less than 2 sentences, y'all. So I want to specify this just so you understand that at the end of the day, you got to make it short and sweet. Add specifically the key details about how you were involved and the experience that you gained from this, or at least just kind of giving a general overview of what you're doing. So kind of looking at this example on your right, you can see General Services Foundation, which was one of my extracurriculars. So of course you add that activity type, and so it was community service work. I put that I was the founder and executive director because that is my role in the organization. You can put member, you can put a leadership position, but then also I think this is the best place to add what grades you have completed it in. So I did it throughout my junior and senior year because at the end of the day, that's kind of pretty important just to show that you really are keeping up with things. And I added, of course, the organization name, but then I added a little small description talking about my impacts. So I raised over $20,000 and 30,000 items. I explained what the organization is and really made it happen. One piece of advice for this is, for example, if your leadership position or your extracurricular, for example, you wanted to add was yearbook club. You don't have to really explain what the yearbook club is because at the end of the day, most people understand what a yearbook club would make up of. So don't waste characters on that. Focus on the impacts, what you've done through the yearbook club. What have you really done with this? And so it really kind of goes to show you got to be careful with your space. And this goes for all parts of your application as a whole. Okay, you can go to the next page. Another piece of your application is your recommendations. So as for recommendations, something really big is you should be asking for your recommendations now, y'all. And when I say this, what I mean is if you have asked for like teacher recommendations before the summer came through, awesome. If you haven't, probably go visit your teacher and ask them in the first few weeks of your senior year, because they're probably going to get a lot of asks for recommendations. And you want to stay on top of that ball. You want to give them time to write it, because if they want to write you the best recommendation possible, you probably shouldn't wait like 2 days before the application is due. And so really do it in person if possible. If you can't and you have to do it via Zoom or even via email, that is okay. But of course, that interaction is really shown when you're able to do it in person. And then of course, really think about them. At the end of the day, they actually do have a few months after you to submit that recommendation. But when you give them that timeline, an idea of what you're doing with your future, if you know, what you're hoping to achieve, accomplish through your college career, it really helps them write that better recommendation. So some teachers already have that planned where they provide you with an additional form to fill out some information. But if they don't, send your resume if you have one, send a digital portfolio, something that showcases the impacts you've been able to have. And should I submit optional recommendations? This is always a big question I get asked. So most of the time, teacher recommendations, they require or have optional between 1 to 3. It is always better to submit teacher recommendations. But as for optional recommendations, if you see to the right, it states a little bit like it could be an arts teacher, a coach, a college access counselor, an employer, basically anyone who's not a teacher in your life. And at the end of the day, usually I will say yes. If you don't have time or don't know anyone who's not a teacher that would be willing to write you a good recommendation, do not ask. It is okay if you don't have one, but it's a nice add if you do have one. So for example, for NC State, I had actually spoken at NC State a few years prior my application time. I asked that professor I spoke for at NC State to write me a recommendation, and she wrote me a great one. Or I had actually worked with a UNC Chapel Hill nonprofit and asked them for a recommendation. They wrote me a recommendation, and that probably helped my application. It will not hurt you to not have an other recommender, but it is usually a great add. So that being said, for example, at the end of the day, what they're trying to do and what these committees who are trying to review your applications are trying to do is they're trying to see, are you a good fit for them? So are you a good fit for UNC Chapel Hill or App State or UNC Charlotte or whatever college you might be hoping to attend? And so if you also don't know of an other recommender, but you know of someone from that college who would be willing to write you a good recommendation, ask them to. Because at the end of the day, if someone from that college sees that you're high vibe, high energy, and they really think you'd be a good fit for that college, that means you fit for that college if other people at that college think you're awesome. And so those are just some little tips for the other recommendations. And at the end of the day, it's really about what you think makes sense. If you don't feel comfortable asking for another recommendation, that is completely okay. Like even personally, I have some students from General Services Foundation who are asking me this year for college recommendations, and I'm writing them because I think that these students deserve a great recommendation, and for UNC Chapel Hill to see that they really deserve to be a fit for their college, because at the end of the day, they are a great fit for that college, and I see it. You can go on to the next slide. Ooh, yes, FERPA. This is probably something you have not heard of, but this is also something that is probably pretty big that not everybody thinks about either. So FERPA is the legal right to see your recommendation and approve it before you send it. So for example, if you got a recommendation from me or a teacher or a professor somewhere else or an employer, whoever it might be, Common Application by law has to show you your recommendation before it is submitted. So you get to approve or deny whether it's submitted. But a lot of colleges are interested and really prefer you to waive your FERPA rights. So the legal right to see your recommendation and approve it before you send it. The reason being is colleges are suspicious sometimes. So I guess, how do I put it? Like, if they see that you have to look at your recommendation before you submit it and approve it, they're going to be wondering, why do they have to look over it first? Are they really that bad of a student that they have to have the teacher show them the recommendation first before it's sent to the college? But if you waive those rights, you are not the middleman. It goes straight from your professor or your teacher or your extracurricular coach all the way to the college without you looking at it. Of course, you can make a deal with the professor or teacher or whatever and say, hey, can I look at the recommendation first? They might say yes. But usually speaking, if you waive those rights, colleges will understand, okay, they didn't have to look at that application or recommendation first. I think it's okay. And so they'll think it's pretty okay as well. And so when you first go onto your recommendations tab in August, it will ask you about FERPA. And so my general tip is to waive those rights, because then colleges will understand that you don't need to be that middleman. You do not need to approve it. And at the end of the day, hopefully it can be good that you, waive it. So then they understand, okay, there's nothing to be suspicious about here. Another section that will be close to your personal statement is the additional information section of your application. The additional information is literally as is, additional information. Once you click additional information that you want to share additional information, there are two potential tabs that you can answer questions for. You have, I believe, 500 words for these, but one of them is about COVID-19. If you have been affected by COVID and that has somehow hurt your grades, like you have lost a loved one and that may be affected your mental state because you were grieving and you really couldn't focus on your grades, add that to that COVID-19 section. Do not add the basic, oh yeah, I was on virtual school and blah, 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 because at the end of the day, everyone was on virtual school. But if you do want to specify and say, hey, I do want to let you all know that this is what happened and this is why my grades might have dropped during this time, or this is what was going on during my freshman year of high school, so please be aware of that, then that is a great place to add it. And the other section for additional information is just the general additional information section. If you feel like there is something you want to share with all of your colleges, because this additional information is shared with all of your colleges, similar to the personal statement, you do want to try to make sure that you can, how do I put it? Like, you can showcase something. So I wrote my personal statement on General Services Foundation and why community service is so important to me. But I did want to showcase to other colleges and all of my colleges that I was applying for that business was something important to me as well. So personally, I added basically like my own second supplemental essay that went to all the colleges in this additional information section, talking about how I interned with a small business and helped them grow their sales and grow traction to their products and got them into Target long term. And that was personally a story that I think really helped me get into some business programs that I was interested in. And so those are just some little things to think about when it comes to your application. So if you feel like there is something else you want to add and the 650 words in your common applications personal statement is not enough, use your additional information section. That is not something that is just like never used. It's there for a reason. And so that is something you can utilize. And then submitting applications. This is probably something that gets everyone a little bit like confused on, and this is why I want to provide this as a resource. Of course, we will be sharing this presentation afterward with y'all as well as the recording. But just for y'all now, submitting applications is probably pretty important. You want to make sure you hit all the right deadlines and things. Just so you all understand, you can go into the common application, and on the common application, there is a section where you can find all of the due dates for your applications right then and there. So once everything is added to your dashboard, all the colleges you want to apply for, you can go and see, okay, this one's due November 15th. This one's due in January. And you can really figure that out. But so you can understand the context of what they're saying, this slide is for you. There are 4 different main types of applications when submitting. And the first one is early decision. So early decision, there are sometimes 2 rounds of these, but the main one is early decision 1. And this is usually due in October or November for most colleges. So probably be submitting it in a few months. And this means that if you are accepted into early decision, so maybe you apply early decision to Duke, you must go to Duke. So you can't, how do I put it? Like if Duke is your top priority school and you go early decision for Duke and you get into Duke, you have to go to Duke. Same thing for Carnegie Mellon, or a lot of private schools are the ones that have the early decision. So if you get into NYU, and because I think I think NYU is a private school. But if you go into NYU and you get into NYU, you have to go to NYU. It is legally binding. Unless, for example, there is some issues with like if tuition is too much or something like that and your scholarship is not enough, something like that. That's, I think, one way to like weave through it. But generally speaking, you must attend the college if you get an early decision. And so this is just something to make sure if it is early decision, you must attend. I have to keep repeating that because I've actually had people that I am friends with apply early decision and then actually have it not be their top priority school. It's okay if you don't apply to a school early decision. And the reason why is because if, for example, a school like UNC Chapel Hill or UNC Charlotte is your top and number one school, and if you want to get, if you get in, you're 100% sure going there, they do not have early decision. They have something called early action, where this means you can also apply October, November timeframe. But when you get your decision back, you get your decision back. You don't have to attend that school. So early action is non-binding, but early decision is binding. Most public schools are early action and most private schools have early decision for that first semester application. So that's just making sure you look through it when you're applying. Is it early decision, early action? Something to make sure of. And then of course, if you do not feel like you have everything done by that early action time, that is completely okay. You can apply to a regular decision. So these are due in about the January, February timeframe for all colleges. So private schools, public schools, they all usually have a regular decision that's due in January or February. The biggest difference is, again, it's non-binding, but you get your decision a few months later. So for example, for early decision and early action, you're likely to get those decisions between like the December to January timeframe because you have to give them a few months. But of course, if you're submitting it in January, February, you'll usually get your decision back in March or April. And something to think about is colleges, they actually have their decision dates a lot of the times. The like national college decision date is May 1st. So you would have less time to make that decision if you do apply regular decision. So personally, something that I know some students did, they applied early action for all the public schools, but then because there's no early action and they didn't want to go early decision for the private schools, they applied for the private schools regular decision. But then at the same time, there are some students who applied all early action because they did all public schools, or they did all regular decision because they didn't have their personal statement ready at the time. And that is completely okay, because especially between early action and regular decision, where really the only difference is when you get it back, a lot of times colleges do not prioritize one over the other. So they're not going to say, oh, you applied regular decision, you don't get it. That's not their thing. It's more so, is your application up to par? But a lot of the times you will see that more students get in early action just because more students usually apply early action. And then lastly, we have rolling decisions. So this is usually for smaller colleges who always have some open seats. And so there, when it works for rolling decisions, it's the sort of thing where you can apply anytime until the seats are full for that college. So even after February, March, April, if there are seats still open, you can still apply. And so there's always something to think about. If you see that there are probably going to be a lot of seats left for a specific school and they're rolling decisions, maybe don't prioritize that until a little bit later and getting in those actual applications first that actually have a deadline, like the regular decision, early action, early decision, or something like that. Ooh, common data sets. This is probably the best kept secret from colleges. Colleges do not want you knowing about this on a usual time frame. Like they don't want you knowing about this. So the common data set is something that they don't want to share because it usually has the real numbers, statistics, and information per year. So what you can do is you can Google like common data set for a specific year. So common data set UNC Chapel Hill, common data set UNC Charlotte, common data set Duke. And they must have one of these posted somewhere online. So it'll probably be one of the first that you can find. But that being said, of course, right now, probably the 2021, 2022 ones are still not out. So you can look at the 2020, 2021 ones. But what this is, it's the real information about first year admissions per school. So for example, a lot of the times colleges will not update their numbers. Like for example, if their applications have gotten more rigorous and fewer people have actually gotten in than previous years, a lot of the times they will not update it on Google and things, just because they understand if they show that it's more rigorous, sometimes a lot less people will apply. And they do want, of course, the most number of people to apply because they get special funding and stuff for that. But that being said, this can be super helpful for y'all. So for example, on the right here, you can see that this is UNC Chapel Hill's common data set. And they talked about that year how SAT and ACT did not really matter. And so they talked about that in their tours and things. But if you look at standardized test scores in that row, it says that it is very important. And I'm like, huh, interesting. So I do believe this is like during the COVID time. So it's very important if you did submit it, but it's probably better to submit it if you are in range. That being said, a tip for y'all, if you are in range, slightly below range or above range, please submit your SAT, ACT scores, or whichever one you prefer. Reason being is sometimes they will be like, oh, why did you not submit your scores? Is it because you got like the worst score possible? They would never know. And so if you are close to the range for that school, submit it. If of course you're far off, you don't have to. But usually it is better to submit the scores than not. So kind of going through this is just, it's a lot to look at. So you don't have to actually look at it very closely, I promise you. But something good to have is you can see if diversity is something important to you. You can see in the top left corner how many people they accepted per specific races. So you can see including first year students. UNC Chapel Hill had 1,913 students who were Latino and Hispanic actually get accepted into their school. When, for example, oh my God, American Indian people, for example, were 72. And so it can really help you figure out if you're going to fit into that college and if it has the levels of diversity you are hoping. But then also below, you can see the average SAT and ACT scores for the year. Again, they may not update this online, but these are the accurate numbers. So you can say, okay, this is the 25th percentile and 75th percentile for SAT and ACT. They do not usually have a preference of which you want to submit, but it does say that a lot more students submitted ACT scores than SAT scores for that year. If you see 60% of students submitted ACT scores, while only 15% submitted SAT scores, meaning the rest of them just did not submit scores that year. But it just kind of gives you an approximate about, okay, this is where I should kind of be. If I'm in range, that's great, because at the end of the day, your grades and your SAT, ACT scores are kind of just what gets you in the door. It's kind of like, okay, great, you got those scores. Now we're going to look at you a little bit further. And if you don't have those scores and those grades, they'll look at you and they'll be like, okay, just something to keep note of. And then they'll keep looking at your application, because these are a lot of the times holistically reviewed applications. So they look at everything, not just your grades or your SAT, ACT scores, whatever that might be. And then of course, you can also see in the top right corner how many people actually got accepted into the school. That's probably important to know. And then of course, in the bottom right, again, you can see the academic and non-academic rigor of the specific schools. And then FAFSA, this is also something that is usually very important, but this is for the free application for federal student aid. And so what the FAFSA is this is your opportunity to get government funding that you do not have to pay back. And so this is funding that is, even if you don't think you're going to get any federal aid, probably good for you to fill out, because who knows, you might get some aid, but then also a lot of merit-based scholarships do ask for you to fill it out. And so our hope is that you fill it out before the winter break time frame, just because there's like this secret idea. I don't know if it's true or not. And honestly, college counselors and stuff don't know if it's true or not either. That of course, the government only has a certain amount of aid. And if you apply after the time, so after the winter break time frame, there might be less left. So there might be less of a chance you're going to get as much student aid. Is that true? We don't know, but it's probably better to not risk it and just do it before the winter break time. You will also see on your FAFSA, when you get that FAFSA determination, of course, those expenses that they will not pay back, but then they will also say, hey, this is how much of loans and things you're eligible for. The difference for loans is that is going to be paid back. It is going to be, well, loans. So you have to pay it back and you have to create a plan to pay it back after college. And so if you have not looked into that, that it's probably something to start looking at in the next few months. And then the timeline, this is always probably something that is going to be useful for y'all. For the personal essay, that personal statement that we were talking about at the beginning, probably good to start brainstorming now. Something pretty nice is I have found some pretty good exercises online that are to help you brainstorm, and that will be shared with you after the session, as well as, for example, other common data set examples and other things that we've discussed in the past, like the prompts, that will all be discussed in the email afterward to you. And then our hope is that you have the first draft done like August-ish. So again, this is on a timeline that's editable per person. So if you feel like early August may not be good, that's okay. I probably finished my draft the end of August, but I wish I had a little bit more time. So I say first week of August. And then it's probably good to have that final draft and that final essay completed by the first week of school. The reason why I say this is because you're still going to have to write your supplementals and you're still going to be back in school. So you're still going to have to start keeping up with your grades. And at the end of the day, they still look at those first semester senior year grades. So you still want to kind of keep it up. And so one thing I will say is kind of keep like a block period for your class, or not for your class, for your essays. The essays are not, of course, a class because it's that sort of thing, but it takes about the time of like a fifth course for a lot of people. And so that being said, you want to make sure you keep a few extra hours per week aside to finish up your essays, to work on them, to get them reviewed, get them looked over. And a lot of the times, you want to make sure you kind of have that done when you can. So working on it, like for example, UNC Chapel Hill's application is always due 2 weeks before literally every other college. Why? I don't know. Is it annoying? 100%. But that being said, the first supplementals you probably want to work on are your UNC supplementals. That being said, something I do want to let you know is after this call, we will also be sharing some example personal statements and example supplementals from the schools nearby for you all to utilize. So that's just something that you can look at afterward. But supplemental essays will be provided starting August 1st on the common application, because that is when it opens for you. But if you want to get a head start and you want to be ahead of the game in a sense, you can actually start writing them probably now, because most of the time, year to year, the supplementals are the same or are very similar to the past ones. So UNC's probably hasn't changed in quite a few years, and I doubt it's going to change probably for the next few years. And if so, they'll probably change like the wording a little bit or something like that, but not the entire question. And then of course, usually they're, because they're also the previous ones from the past, something that is pretty nice is looking at the resources College Vine and College Essay Guide. Those two resources, for example, for some of the bigger colleges, like if you search up College Vine, UNC Chapel Hill essays, they will actually walk you through how to write the UNC Chapel Hill essays, which I think is pretty cool. And it'll also give an example for some questions and say, hey, it'll kind of be like, hey, make sure you don't write all 4 essays, choose 2 of the 4, or it'll kind of give you those little tips. And so for most of the schools that are considered a little bit or have some higher application numbers, they're going to have that for you. So utilize resources, utilize Google, don't cheat, but use it for reference when you're trying to like be like, hey, like what sorts of things could I write about? Or how do I actually kind of go about writing this sort of essay? Because at the end of the day, Google is amazing. And then of course, due dates, as we were kind of discussing earlier, usually early decision and early application is November 1st. And UNC is usually October 15th. Why? I do not know. Do I wish it was not October 15th? 100%. I wish it was just November 1st like the rest of them. And then regular decision is different per college. So I will recommend to make sure you actually have that down. And we are actually going to be giving you a tracker sheet to kind of think about, okay, these are the colleges I want to apply to. And then you can list down, okay, this is why I want to apply to it. This is when the due date is. And the reason why you probably want to have that down is so it's like front and center. And then of course, rolling applications are first come, first serve until the class is full, which is probably going to be pretty late into the year. But just something for you to think about. And then start putting questions in the chat if you have any, y'all. But some other tips that I have for you is think about your RCN status. So for those who don't know what RCN status is it is your residency determination number. So you are going to go onto a portal, and on that portal, it's going to make you, but specifically your parents, fill out all these different things talking about, oh, what is your salary? Oh, do you have any files like utilities and stuff that prove that you live in North Carolina and stuff like that? Because that is what's going to get you in-state tuition for North Carolina colleges. So schools like UNC and NC State, you're probably going to be paying like $30,000, $40,000 a year, unless you fill that out correctly. Because it was very scary when I got my NC State application back and they said, oh, you're going to have to pay $30-something thousand per year. And I was like, and I had filled out the RCN wrong. Or no, I didn't fill it out wrong. They just messed it up, or I don't know. And then I called them and I was like, hey, this is my number. And they're like, oh, okay, you're all good. But yeah, try to get it right the first time so it doesn't scare you when you get back your application and it's like very bad. But that being said, also something just that's really nice to utilize is Google Drive. Keep track of all your essays in a folder, all of your brainstorming exercises and stuff in a folder, all those different things. Again, we will be sharing a lot of resources so you can make copies of those and really just utilize them and keep it all nice and organized. Because if you're not organized and you lose an entire essay you wrote, that's going to be very not fun. Because then you'd have to rewrite it and then it might not be the same quality or caliber, and then it's going to be a very big mess. Get feedback on your essays, but do not lose your voice. So you probably hear this one, and it's probably one of the most generic tips you're going to get from college admissions officers, but get feedback, but don't make it sound too not like you, because at the end of the day, you want to showcase who you are, not who your mom is, not who your school counselor is, whatever that sort of thing feels like. And that being said, if you are ever looking for feedback, I am always here to give you advice, to review your essays, and I'll have my email on a later slide for y'all to take note of if you want. And something I want to keep for y'all is it is okay to brag. your college application is like, of course, don't brag. Don't say, oh yeah, I got this on my score and I got this, but it's okay to talk highly of yourself. That is exactly what you want to do. You want to showcase yourself as the best version of yourself because you're awesome. So if you want to talk about an amazing project you did, don't stifle yourself. Be accurate. Talk about, I did actually did this. I led this. I was involved in this. It is okay. I understand that feeling of the imposter syndrome. Like you don't feel like you should be talking about it because you didn't deserve it or whatever. You deserved it if you got it, most likely. So it's yours. Like talk about it. Talk about your experiences. Talk about what you learned. Talk about what you were able to make happen. And then of course, if SAT or ACT scores are optional, kind of like how we were discussing earlier, but if you are in range or slightly below or above or whatever it is, send them. Because at the end of the day, it's your grades and your SAT and ACT scores that get you in the door. If, for example, the range of a SAT score, ACT score is a 27 to a 31, and you got a 26, submit that. It is not a bad score. You might be like, oh, it's not in range. It is okay. For example, if you got like, I don't know, a 14 and your SAT, AC, or your ACT score is the range that I was talking about earlier, then maybe look back at that and maybe don't submit it if it's optional. But it is always probably better to submit than to not submit. Except I think maybe Ivies might be an exception because a lot of the times their ACT, SAT scores are very high up there. And so it really just depends on the person for that. For private schools, show demonstrated interest. So something that a lot of private schools have is this idea of demonstrated interest where they want to see that you are passionate about that college. So of course, this can be seen through a lot of them having that why essay to say, hey, why Duke? Or whatever that might be. But this also means that they want you taking classes at Duke. They want you taking certifications at Duke. They want you going to tours at Duke. So they will look through a database that literally keeps track of everything. My mom is a Carnegie Mellon alumni, and she got a list the other day of literally every tour, every virtual thing I went to, every like time I met with a professor, all on a sheet of paper. And that is what they look at. And it's quite insane how much they have kept track of. But if there is anything you can sign up for, like even little newsletters and things, but especially trying to get involved directly with the professors in some way or form, even just setting up a meeting with them and having some simple discussion, do that. Because at the end of the day, it matters a lot more to private schools to show that demonstrated interest. But if you're not sure how much demonstrated interest matters, it's probably good to go back to those common data sets and see if under the demonstrated interest, if it's considered, not considered, important, very important, whatever that factor may be. And then of course, as we kind of discussed earlier, be sure to fill out that FAFSA before winter break. Do that with your guardians because a lot of the times you're not going to be able to do it yourself. A lot of it's like taxes and things. And then a question that's very interesting that doesn't come up for all colleges, but I just wanted to keep for y'all is if a college asks for the opportunity to interview you, say yes. That does not mean you will get an interview because they can, like, for example, a school like Duke cannot interview like, I don't know, hundreds of thousands of kids, not hundreds of thousands, but tens of thousands of kids. But if you say yes, that means, okay, that means you have the opportunity to be a good candidate. And that means you could also really showcase if you do that interview, that can really showcase that you're a good potential applicant, and that can really add to your draw as a candidate. And of course, if they do not reach out to you and you did say, yes, I'm open to the interview, well, that just shows them that demonstrated interest yet again. And that shows that you were interested. And that doesn't mean you are a terrible applicant, I promise you. That more so just means, okay, I understand. we didn't have the space to interview you, and that is okay. But of course, for most of the local schools, like for those trying to go for a school like Duke or something, because you're in the area, you are more likely to get an interview. So that's just a note I wanted to leave for y'all. Questions? Does anyone have any questions? Or Amy, did you get any questions previously?
No, there are no questions in the chat or the Q&A yet, but everybody, if you have something, now is the time to send it in.
Awesome. And while they're sharing anything, if they have, if you want to go to the next slide, you can go to this email. Feel free to copy or save this email, sonali@generalservicesfoundation.org. And what this can really help you with is if you are looking for anyone to help you throughout the college application process. I am not a college counselor, but I do have lots of experience listening past friends who got into colleges and things. And I can really be able to review your essays, help you find what colleges you're interested in, whatever you're hoping for, and hopefully be able to help you do it for free, because I do understand that, of course, sometimes money is a limitation, and I want to be able to help y'all have some accessible resources in the community.
Yes, thank you for providing all of this information as well as your services. We really appreciate it. So we have a great question. What is the cost for each application?
Ooh, okay, that's an interesting one because every college is a little bit different, but usually it ranges between $65 to $95 per application. And so that means I'd say it's approximately $85 per application, just like on a general lens. But that also means that if you're looking for example, like ways to shorten the cost, I do believe you can go through your school and ask them to cover the funds. And in some scenarios, the colleges will do that if you make a request for that. That being said, also, you are going to have additional other fees that are just kind of there. You do not have to, depending on the college, submit your SAT and ACT scores officially unless you're accepted and you are enrolling in that school. But if they do require your ACT, SAT scores or any other information, then you will have to pay to send it to that college, which is usually between $10 to $15 per college. This being said, also, if you go to other schools that are not your high school, so for example, if you attend a Wake County school, they will send that transcript for you mid-year and end of year. But if you also attended school that's not a dual enrollment school, so I actually took courses at American University, for example, this past year or so, I had to send those scores to all of the colleges so they could see that transcript. And that was also an additional $5 per thing. And so it does add up. And that does suck, but it is what it is. And so the name of the websites to help you write essays for UNC Chapel Hill, they also have these for Wake Forest, Duke, NC State. They're called College Vine and College Essay Guide. So just search up the names of those things and then say UNC Chapel Hill supplementals or whatever it might be that you're looking for. And we will also provide those links like to those resources post meeting. So if you have any questions about that, that is completely okay. And you can kind of respond to that later as well.
Right. If you have any other questions, submit those now. And we'd be happy to answer them.
And of course.
Yes.
So yeah, never hesitate to reach out because I am always here to support you and all of your amazing endeavors. And I'm so excited to see what y'all are able to do.
Yes. Well, we really appreciate you, Sonali, sharing all this information. I'm old, and so the last time I went through the college application process, I was writing it, I was mailing it in the mailbox.
Oh my God.
So a lot has changed. And so as a parent of a rising senior, not knowing how things are done now, I really appreciate you taking the time to walk through this application process for us. So feel free, there's some emails on this screen. That's a way to get in touch with us. And then we will also, as has been referenced, we will send a copy of the presentation. We will send a copy of a recording of the presentation. And then we will also share a Google Drive that has all those wonderful examples that were referred to, as well as any websites that we mentioned as well. So you have all that information in one place. And we are here to help you guys in any way. We appreciate you taking the time to meet with us today. And we'll stay on for a few minutes if you have a question that you'd like to submit in the chat. All right. Thank you so much. We hope you guys have a great evening.
Yes. Have a great night, y'all.